It's Monday and time for the Back to Business podcast, featuring Calgary's industry leaders. Welcome today's show host, Kim Hayden.
Oh, you think you can speak, or you got a story you want to sell or tell or share? You know what? It's all about how are we connecting? What is your excuse to connect? Our next guest, Richard Lee Tai, is in the house to give us insight to your speaking opportunities. But first, our land acknowledgement.
In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Ga'aina, Piikani, the Tsutena, the Eahe Nakota Nations, the Métis Nation Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta.
Welcome to the show, Richard.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
I am excited to get into the meat of this interview because I'm really fascinated by the speaking world. And I talk to a lot of people around speaking. I'm not a speaker. Everybody tells me I need to change my language around that and say I am a speaker. But I'm fascinated about the actual professionalism and everything around speaking. So let's first dive into, really give us a bit of meat as to who is Richard.
Yeah. First of all, I did not expect to be a speaker growing up. So we'll get to how did I land there. But for me, growing up, I felt quite shy and lonely. A big thing for me was like, there's never any classes on how do you make friends. I think it's just something we assume people know how to do. But throughout my childhood and into my teenage years, there's this constant feeling of being an outsider. Yes, I had friends, but there's this fear of like, will they leave me? Will I be abandoned? Do they really like me? And so this carried with me into adulthood as well. So I was born and raised here in Calgary and went to University of Lethbridge for school. And that was a very difficult transition because I was starting from scratch in a new place. I lived on residence, so I was meeting new people, but it felt very superficial. There's this particular flavor of loneliness where you're physically surrounded by people, but still feel invisible because I didn't have that deep sense of connection with them. Social media didn't help either because I'd see people post about the fun events and parties they're going to. And I'm like, why am I not being included? I'm just sitting home alone in my room. I'm a loser.
But don't you feel that there's a whole social anxiety around social media?
Yes.
I have a real struggle going on social media. So, yeah.
Because there's that comparisons where, of course, people are going to post the best parts of their life, their highlights.
The highlight,
And so it can make you feel like, well, I'm falling behind. I'm living a boring life. I don't have as many friends. But it's only like you don't know what's going on behind the scenes.
Exactly. Well, are you an introvert by chance?
Yes.
Okay, that's very fascinating. An introvert so you must. Okay, so keep walking us through this. So you're in Lethbridge.
Yes.
You're feeling isolated, and what's fascinating? This would be, what year is this?
2018.
So 2 years pre-pandemic.
Yes.
And now we're hearing exactly what you're saying globally post-pandemic.
Yes.
So it's almost like in that 4 years of the pandemic, or 3 years, 2 years. I don't know, folks. It feels like groundhog, or what is it, years to me. It's almost like we lost a soft skill set within that short amount of time.
Yes.
Okay, so 2 years pre-pandemic, you're sitting in Lethbridge, which is kind of a farming community. It's going to be a different community. What were you going to school for?
Music and education.
Music and education. What do you play?
Flute.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. I tried the flute, but I had a major overbite. It made it really challenging.
Yeah. I originally was going to be a high school music teacher, but now I'm an entrepreneur, which we'll get to how that transition occurred too. But yeah, I was feeling very homesick, very lonely. And what changed for me? One day I saw a post from Humans of New York. I don't know if you've ever heard of them before, but for listeners that don't know, it's this photographer who decided he's going to go out and interview strangers to get to know their stories. And afterwards, he'd snap a photo and post it online. And that really caught on. I think like Humans of New York has millions of followers nowadays.
It actually became an entire it set a whole new precedence
Right.
in media.
Yeah. Because I think what captivates people about it is every single person you pass by on the street or in the hallways, they have a story. And if you just start that conversation, you might realize you have more in common than you think, just because we're all human. And so I'd been following that page for quite a while, and I thought, what if I did that at my university? Because I was desperately craving connection and community, and I had an interest in photography and writing. I'm like, I could do that. So I called it Humans of U Leth for like University of Lethbridge. And I remember one of the first students I talked to, first of all, I was like, deleting and revising a text and I was going to send them this message like, hey, I'm going to try out this project. Would you have 30 minutes to chat? I want to build community. And to my surprise, they said yes. So that was like my first time making an excuse to connect with them. And in that conversation, I remember asking, what was your transition to university? How's it been for you? And they shared, I felt lonely. It's hard to make friends. I feel homesick. So that's when it clicked for me. I wasn't alone in feeling lonely, and there's never anything wrong with me. It's just that this topic is under-discussed. How different would my life have been if there was a speaker that had come talk to me in university or younger to normalize this topic of loneliness and teach me how to connect? Because there's, common advice of just put yourself out there more, but it doesn't really get into, well, how? Like, what are the barriers, as you said, like around social anxiety that are preventing people from going to those events and socializing? So I realized even if that speaker didn't exist for me, I can be that speaker. There's younger Richards out there and older Richards out there that are also struggling with their sense of identity and belonging and connection. So that's what I've committed myself to do. I want to create a world without loneliness and teach people how you can make excuses to connect in your daily life. So what started as a passion project or even like coming from a place of pain, I turned it into purpose. Like, I struggled with this loneliness. There's other people going through it too. Can we address this issue? Because it's not just me. It's a systemic issue. As you said, like after the pandemic, how many people's social skills are rusty? And they don't want to reach out.
There's new studies coming out, which is very scary, as I am a mother of two young men. Well, my oldest is no longer young, but neither am I. But there's studies coming out that we're in fear for our young men, even having connectivity with other humans. What was it? They figured that by 2050, something like 1 in every 7 young men will have fewer than 2 human contacts in a single week. That's not healthy. Human beings, we are, whether we're an introvert or an extrovert, we are social animals. We're just like the monkeys. We need family. We need friends.
Yes, we're wired for connection. There's a ton of research around how having healthy relationships or strong connections predicts a healthy and happy life. Like it literally makes us
married
live longer.
Men, 2 good women like me, will actually live longer. That is a statistical fact, right? So so you started doing this podcast that's not a podcast, interviewing people of U Leth. That's very cool. So like totally ahead of the trend on so many things. So you found it's like the same type of, everybody's going through the same challenges.
By the end of my project, I actually interviewed over 70 people, like students, professors, even the president of the university at one point. And all of those stories, there's a part of that myself that resonated with it. Like each time I felt like, oh, I'm not alone. It's like healing a part of myself. And people had fascinating stories. Like I remember one person, he said he lived in the woods for a few years before he came to university. There's another lady, she served in the Canadian Armed Forces. And so she had like a tattoo of poppies on her arm, and she explained the significance of that to her. When I was interviewing the president of the university, he shared, well, first of all, that was intimidating to interview him. It took quite a while to actually arrange it with his executive assistant. But when we were chatting, he shared that he was diagnosed with cancer a few years ago. And that was a very tough time for him, but there's support from all corners of the university. And it just showed him that every person you talk to, you don't know what's going on behind the scenes in their life. And so to be empathetic. And the big thing for him was like servant leadership. So yeah, that project started as a passion project, but I'm like, this is my life's work. I want to continue doing this. So around that time too, I had a chance to do a TEDx talk on how to find excuses to connect. I realized that was the common thread through my life. And then Excuses to Connect ended up being the name of my business. I'm like, how can we teach people to make meaningful connections easier and fun? Because for some people, it can feel very stress and anxiety inducing, this idea of approaching people or networking and so on. So how can we actually make it easier? Because we need connection personally and professionally.
I think that coming from an extrovert,
Yes.
which I'm a very high extrovert, however, it's always stress inducing because we are always wondering, did we say the right thing? It may take the
Yes.
introvert a little bit longer to get to that networking or get to that question or get to that engagement. But the introvert tends to show up a bit better prepared.
Yeah.
The extrovert, like me, will show up and just wing it. And just winging it, remember how I said I'm not a public speaker?
Yes.
You don't just wing intentional communication.
Right.
So, and you know what? And it's funny because I'm on a journey with a gentleman who, much like myself, he's just very much an extrovert. He's very much a salesperson. He wants to be a speaker. And it's taken him a year and a half to come to that point where, wait a minute, I have to slow down and be very intentional
Yes.
with everything I say and do because I have X amount of time to communicate this vast amount of emotion or knowledge or anything like that. No, I find this incredible. So out of this, I'm going to be a music teacher. You birthed Excuses to Connect.
Yes.
And who would have known when all of this came together that literally 4 years later, post-pandemic, this is going to be one of the most critical things we need because human connection, face-to-face, networking is essentially the only way to really grow a business now.
Yes.
Because the reality is everything else I can do through an AI generator. And that's going to have, the more and more we do at a distance, the less impact we're going to have.
Yes.
We are the impact.
Yeah. I mean, in business, people connect to humans.
Yeah.
Yes, you might have lots of employees, your company branding, but they care about having a genuine connection with that individual. So I like this whole aspect of connection flows through my personal life, but how I run my business as well. Because I'll do very unique, perhaps unconventional things. For example, one time I got a speaking request from the University of Calgary. So they had come across my name and information. They sent me an email. It's like, hey, we'd like to bring you in. How much are your fees? Can we chat more? An expected response, a typical response would be you write an email back. It's like, hey, thanks for your email. Here's my scheduling link to book a time for us to chat. Look forward to talking further. What I thought to do is I am going to pull out my phone and record a video of myself. And I said, hey, I know you and I have not met yet, but I like to record these personalized videos to introduce myself. It's actually one of the strategies I teach to students as well in terms of how to creatively connect. Hope you're staying warm. I know it's winter time right now. I've left my scheduling link here in this email, so when you get a chance, have a look at it and book a time to chat, and I look forward to connecting further. It's a 1-minute video.
Was it a Loom or a Zoom or what? How did you
Just
record that?
literally on my phone.
Literally on
And
your phone.
I uploaded it to YouTube as an unlisted video and then attached that in my email back to this individual. And guess what her response back was? I've never received anything like this before. What a great way to connect. And it didn't take me that much extra effort, but the impact is so significant, especially when you're the first. How many emails has this person received before from other speakers? That just, the typical thing, which is fine. But if I'm the first, that's going to stick in her mind. And I know for a fact, like she told her colleagues about it too, because it was one of my friends that referred me there. It's like, wow, Richard, you're like the talk of the office right now, like because you sent out that video to her. So I really thinking like, how do you hyper-personalized things? Because it's just fun too. Think of it, I don't know anyone that opens up their email inbox and says to themselves, I'm so excited to answer my emails today. But if
no. Coming from the person that has like 6,000 dead emails in my inbox, so don't. Yeah, you don't want to see.
Yeah, but if you see, this email in your inbox is this like, hey, I have a surprise little video for you, just for you. That's gonna make them pause, and it's gonna, they're gonna have fun with it. It's gonna be refreshing to them. So that's just one of the small example of many things that I do of how do you integrate excuses to connect in your daily life.
So tell us a bit about your business. Like, you're not a teacher. Teacher would have been great because your mom and dad would have said, oh, he's got a teaching job, so he has benefits. He has a steady paycheck.
Right.
There's a retirement option. You just like literally went off to left field here, and there's no safety net. There's no nothing, right?
Right.
Tell us why, excuses to connect is the path for you.
Yes.
And also, if you wouldn't mind sharing, like maybe one of your greatest challenges in shifting from a job security mindset to a no security mindset.
Right. Yeah. So as I was saying, I was studying music and teaching in university. But in the last year of my program, I realized that I know a lot of teachers that are very burnt out. And so I didn't see it as a sustainable career path for me, unfortunately. I thought, I could be teaching 3-4 years and then I'd be unhappy with my life too. So let's avoid that. And so that's what pivoted me into entrepreneurship instead. And I will say I recognize I'm quite privileged in the sense that my parents provide a lot of stability for me. I'm very young. But
if you don't mind me asking, how young?
How old do you think I am?
Well, based on your timeline, I would put you at about 22.
I'm 26.
26.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a son who's 26.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
he's just now really getting his feet underneath him.
Yeah.
I think the pandemic kind of threw a curveball in for a lot of our young professionals.
Yes. Yeah, but the reason I mention this is I can recognize how for people that are older, that have families, that transition to entrepreneurship can be much more difficult because, you have a stable salary, benefits, you have the golden handcuffs. It's like, I can't really leave that cushy job because it's going to destabilize or put my family at risk.
Yeah.
Versus for me, I don't have kids. I don't have a partner right now. So I'm like, it allows me the opportunity to take all these risks. So I'm like, I'm going to leverage this time and opportunity while it exists to see how far I can go. So that's sort of what led me into this realm. As for the teaching, in fact, I still see myself as an educator. I'm an educator at heart. And I feel so fortunate that I've been able to still express or fulfill that part of myself through the speaking I do. Because that is teaching. Like, I get to go into a place, share my wisdom, have transformational insights with the audience, and then leave. I'm not stuck in a bureaucratic environment, let's say, with like teaching Monday to Friday. So really, I'm still a teacher. But it's just come together in this roundabout way. In terms of what I do in my business, it was a lot of trial and error. I think that's the story for most entrepreneurs. I have a music degree. I don't know anything around marketing or sales or bookkeeping. So it was a very steep learning curve to actually piece those things together. So I was trying, just throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. Because I tried coaching, I tried podcasting, I made stickers at one point, did professional speaking. So after a while trying out all those things, I realized professional speaking is where it's at for me. Because of course, one-on-one mentorship coaching can make an impact on people. But through speaking, I can deliver one message and it impacts hundreds of people at once. And any one of those people in the audience can lead to further collaborations and opportunities. And the thing is for me, yes, I'm in this partially for money because you need to be financially sustainable, but so much of it I'm driven from purpose, like the impact, because there's other people that are lonely out there. Because it took me how many years of my life to actually come to that conclusion that there's nothing wrong with me. And one of the poems that resonates with me the most, the title of the poem is Why Bother? And the poem's only one line long. The text is, because right now there's someone out there with a wound in the exact shape of your words. And that really stuck with me.
Wow.
Because, who is it in that audience that's been waiting for their whole life to hear what I'm about to say, and that validates and heals that part of them, that recognizes, no, there's nothing wrong with them. They're not alone. There's hope.
And there's different stages.
Yeah.
There's different stages. So I come from I have a whole backstory, and the reality is I'm at a position in my life, like if we actually looked at ourselves to where we have one hand where we're reaching up and one hand where we're reaching back, if we always are looking at our life and ourself as that experience, to me, that's really what, if you're a photographer and you see things through the lens and you're really good at it, it is literally selfish not to do it.
Yeah.
Because your photography will speak to somebody who is maybe 2 steps behind you and needs that moment to connect.
Yes.
There's a lot of people that I think that, especially with how harsh social media has been, there are a lot of people who are just disappearing into the woodwork. And they call that, that silent middle. Well, that's not just a political thing. I think that is literally a life thing. And that's, I have absolute admiration for people who are willing to do the hard work to make a life income from public speaking. And, those who do it through their art, through their music. Yep. It's so important because we can get stuck in this world of technology and, nuts and bolts and cogs and assembly lines and, these factory jobs, these that if we don't have art, that's what words are. That's what music is. That's what photography is. Then the world becomes a very gray place.
Yes. Yeah, I will make the point too, because sometimes there's the narrative or stereotype of the starving artist, which I don't entirely agree with.
You know what? I interviewed a gal who does nothing but train people on how to make money in your local market through your art.
Yeah.
That's crazy that you bring that. You're the second person I've ever heard of that talks about starving artists, and that should not be.
Yeah.
Should not.
Right, because when it comes to public speaking, and I know you said you're not a public speaker, you can make a good living from it. It's challenging, of course, but it's being able to take, for example, my topic of connection and loneliness, and what problem does it solve in the world? How does this apply to corporations in terms of there's disconnection in the workplace too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like this transition to return to office or, working remotely or hybrid, trust breakdown, miscommunications, toxic workplaces. So it comes back down to communication and connection skills, right? So when I present to the different audiences I present to, it's like, what problem does that solve for them is what I keep in mind as a speaker. And that way you're generating value and able to make a living from this. Yeah.
Exactly. What's one key? Okay, so you've talked about being paid as a speaker. It's not easy. And my understanding is there's kind of like 3 or 4 different ways of making revenue as a speaker. One is that speak to promote a product. Like, do you have a book? Do you have a course, right? So going on those stages, you may not get paid to be on that stage, but you have an opportunity to introduce a solution to your audience. And then there is that kind of hybrid where they'll pay for your travel, your food, and maybe they'll buy a batch of your books from you, or so you can negotiate in what your services are in exchange for your fee. And then there is the fee, right, where they pay. Yeah. What do you think is the timeline for somebody who's entering? So they're just now building their brand. Yes. Because I get once every 10 days, I have somebody that reaches out and goes, "This is what I really want to do."
Right.
And I just tell them it's really hard. And I can't coach you on this, and you're not going to make money right away because there's so many people out there banging their drum right now. How do you stand out? Right. So walk me through that kind of that origin point of becoming a professional speaker.
Yeah, great question. Because you're right. There's a lot of people like how many leadership speakers are there, like mental health or workplace well-being speakers. So it really does come down to what is your unique perspective on this. The tagline for TED Talks is ideas worth spreading. And so at the core of any TED or TEDx talk is what's your idea worth spreading? Yes, the topic area might be leadership or emotions. We talked about Brene Brown earlier. Her idea worth spreading in her talk is vulnerability should be shared and not shied away from. So that's the key lesson or message for people to take away. In my case, it's you can make meaningful connections easier by finding an excuse to connect. So there's a lot of work to be done initially in really examining your life stories. What's your unique spin on this topic that's going to differentiate you from the other speakers in this market? And that will give you, your competitive advantage to actually stand out. And so part of that work too comes down to like, what problem are you solving? I think can be a lot of beginner speakers that think like, I have this inspirational story I'm going to go tell.
Yeah.
Great. That's one component, but what is the outcome? What's the takeaway that the audience is going to get? What's the return on investment if we're using more like business terms? Because there has to be something actionable or transformational as a takeaway for that audience.
Yes.
And sometimes actually that inspirational story disconnects you from your audience. There's some people's like, they've had extraordinary experiences of like, I climbed Mount Everest or had this very rare disease that I was able to overcome. And sometimes as an audience member, you can think to yourself, that person's that person's reality is so different from mine.
Exactly.
I can't actually relate to them.
Exactly.
So in fact, sometimes trying to be inspirational or motivational backfires.
Yeah.
Because like for me, my story of going to university, feeling lonely, that's the experience of a lot of people.
Yeah, and,
right?
and it doesn't even have to be limited
exactly.
to university. It doesn't have to be limited to the male gender or a young person. We have copious amounts of women who are in their mid-40s and 50s who are now finding themselves single.
Yes.
And they talk about how lonely they feel.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, so it's being able to recognize you don't have to be that ahead, let's say.
Yeah.
Even if I'm 1 or 2 steps ahead, then I'm able to share that story and provide value of like, here's the guide, here's the steps to get to that more connected place. So to recap, I think it really starts with examining what's your unique idea worth spreading, to share it with the world. What problem does it solve? And that will make it so much easier to actually market and sell it as a service or product as a speaker. Yeah, because again, there's hundreds, thousands of speakers out there. How do you differentiate yourself? Yeah, and
one of the things I really, and it really is pinged with me. I said to somebody the other day, even as an extrovert, I personally am not comfortable with networking unless I have a purpose to be there. Mm-hmm. So I like always going with somebody, or I have a job to do there. Maybe I'm signing people in. Maybe I'm, helping set up a table, whatever. I'm very much a purpose-driven person. Mm-hmm. And I love the fact that Excuses to Connect really ties in with kind of where my thought process is around networking. Mm-hmm. What is a great icebreaker for somebody who is on this path of entrepreneurialism? Because as you know, here at the club, we have all these great members, mixers and such. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's people that should be coming that are not coming. Yep. What would be a great icebreaker for them to feel confident enough to walk into a room?
Yes. So even before they're in the room, I want to circle back to your point about purpose, because I think your intention of going there makes a big difference. Because if your intention's like, I'm trying to network with as many people as possible, get like 20 business cards, that can feel daunting for someone that's not used to that. But if you set a more realistic goal of like, I just want to talk with one person and get to know them really well, then that might be more accessible for that individual. Especially for introverts, I'll speak for introverts. It's like, we have a limited social battery. And so recognizing too is like, okay, I'm tired, I want to go home. That's okay too. It's like, you don't have to push yourself. As for an icebreaker question, one I've really found effective is if you were to represent your life in a museum, what items would be on display? And I really like this question.
Mic drop. That was good. That was good. Can you state that?
Sure. If you were to represent your life in a museum, what items would be on display? The reason I like this question is in networking events, I think one of the most typical questions is, what do you do? I hate that question. It's so boring. And also, people are more than their job titles or achievements. Yes, it can be an important part of their life, but what this museum question gets to is, what are those other aspects of your life that are important to you? Family, travel, hobbies. And the nice thing with this question, too, is any of those objects that they list, it's easy to ask a follow-up question because likely there's some significance or story behind that item. And sometimes people bring up very unique items. I remember someone told me they have like a teal typewriter or like a ninja shuriken or whatever it is. Because then, yeah, that's intriguing. You can follow your curiosity of like, oh, why that item? It allows them to represent themselves more holistically too. That, yes, I might have this job title, but I'm all these other things too.
Amazing. Mm-hmm. That is, and folks, we're going to have that in the show notes. That
Great.
Is awesome. That is awesome. What do you believe is the value of networking for an entrepreneur?
Yeah. For me, even the word networking, I'm sort of iffy, have mixed feelings towards, because networking can imply that sort of like it's
connecting.
Transactional.
Okay, so let's just say connecting.
Oh, yeah. But because I know some people can feel like networking is something you should do.
Yeah.
Which then already places some pressure of like, I need to network to be successful as an entrepreneur or whatnot. But I think that's the wrong framing of it. Because if it already feels stressful and having pressure, you're not likely to do it, or you're not likely to have fun with it too.
Yes.
Because when it comes to how I reframe it for folks is, think of a close friend in your life. How did you first meet them? At one point, you were strangers too. Right? You had some initial interaction, and maybe it was in the context of networking, but maybe it's in the context of I was just curious about this person. And that allowed that relationship or that friendship to evolve over time. So to relieve some of that pressure of like, I don't have to have the perfect question, though you can use that museum question, this is actually being interested in the other person makes a significant difference. Because sometimes there's a pressure for us to be interesting. Like, I need to come up as very charismatic and persuasive and all that. But then your whole attention is focused on yourself rather than the other person and being curious of what they have to say. So that's a large part. It's like your intention or your energy that you bring into that.
And if you're going in going, I'm going to meet one person.
Yeah.
I'm going to get and go. And I do believe that actually I believe introverts can make better networkers, quote unquote, networkers, than extroverts. Mm-hmm. Because extroverts, like myself, are running around the room because we feel obligated or we feel like we need to speak to as many people. And it's not about business.
Right.
It's about I want to go around and acknowledge as many people as possible. Mm-hmm. But when you're running around acknowledging as many people as possible, you're not really acknowledging at any depth any individual.
Right.
So, and that's what I found with, that's my biggest challenge is I feel like there is this requirement, and I love that line. I could so like...
Yeah, use it.
That is so fabulous. So we're going to have all of your like excuses to connect content. Are you taking new students at this time, or how does it work within your business if somebody wanted to work with you to get their speaking? Because folks, even if you're not going to be a paid public speaker, being able to speak proficiently on what your business is or what you're doing is so incredibly important. Yeah,
I would say the best way, I mean, if you're listening to this podcast right now, it is an excuse to connect. You could say like, hey, I was listening to this podcast. Shoot me an email. I'm assuming my email will be in the show notes or my website will be there.
Absolutely.
That's the best way. Let's start a conversation and see where it goes, because I believe very much in supporting other people because, as you said, the professional speaking industry can be daunting. But I don't believe in gatekeeping. It's like this information, like I've been very fortunate to have many mentors or coaches support me in this industry, and it's incumbent on me to pass it forward too. One thing, I think we're nearing the end of our podcast episode, right? There's one thing I wanted to try out because, it's so important to me to practice what I preach. Like connection's not just this theoretical thing, you do it. So one of my favorite excuses to connect is what I call the surprise phone call. So it's when I call someone in my life to tell them how much I appreciate them. So I'll do that right now, if you're okay with that.
Yep, sure.
I have someone in mind, so we'll see if they pick up.
And this works with text also. I was having a glass of wine with my children on Saturday night.
Oh yeah?
And I was using the glasses that a friend of ours that I hadn't talked to in a year had given us. So I just sent her a quick message on Sunday morning. They said, by the way, thinking of you last night, had a great dinner with my kids and was drinking from your glasses. And thank you. Yeah. And she woke up and she goes, thank you. She goes, what a great way to wake up.
Exactly. It's as simple as that. It's like that phrase, or it's a principle I talked about in my presentations. I thought of you.
Yeah.
Those four words.
I'm dying to hear what happens.
Okay, well, let's call first and we'll do some debrief and then conclude. We'll see if they pick up. I'm sure you've never had a guest do this before.
Actually, I had somebody a few weeks ago call their AI assistant.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Hopefully this picks up on the microphone too. I will say there. Oh, hello?
Hi.
Hi, Vicky. This is Richard.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. I think you might know what I'm doing because you've seen me do this before.
Really?
Vicky, I just wanted to call you to let you know how proud of you I am. Just to see your growth from, graduating from your counseling program at Rhodes, and you're such a go-getter. Like, I really love your energy when it comes to like finding loopholes, finding possibilities for things. I feel like that's going to be able to take you so far. So I'm glad you're able to come to some of my events and speaking, and very happy to support you along your journey because I just feel like you have so much skills and talents to offer to the world. So yeah, I appreciate that you're in my life.
Oh, thank you so much, Richard. That totally made my day. That definitely boosted me up. I appreciate you saying that. And yeah, it's been quite the journey working with you and learning all the things.
Yeah. Well, I should mention, Vicky, I'm in the middle of a podcast recording episode. So not like a public speaking event, but yeah.
No, that's awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate the phone call.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we'll chat further later. Well,
All right.
hope you carry this sense of happiness and making your day into the rest of your day.
I will. I actually immediately started to tear up or felt it in my throat.
Oh.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right.
Okay, take care. Bye.
That goes into that whole attitude of gratitude.
Yes.
That's amazing. And so literally you've been able to change her trajectory for her day.
Yeah.
Just by saying something kind.
Yeah. It's like a minute, 30-second phone call. But it's that point you're making, like I thought of you.
Yeah.
There's opportunities for these excuses to connect every day. Because we can have those I thought of you moments, but we don't follow through. Like, I might be thinking of an old teacher or a friend, but it's been years since we last chatted. It's going to be awkward if I reach out to them. But no, it's like, I think they'd be pleasantly surprised and like warmed that you were thinking of them and that you reached out to them. So whenever we have those I thought of you moments, to actually follow through with it. Because the big thing with this, that phone call I just did is I think we wait until big occasions to really share what someone means to us, right? Graduations, weddings, eulogies at funerals. But by that point, it's too late, right? That person isn't actually there to hear the impact that they've had on you and why you appreciate them so much. So can we actually do it sooner and more regularly as just part of our daily mindset or habit to connect with others? Because you never know what someone's going through, and that having those few words, that phone call, that thank you note could literally be what they really needed at that time. So that's what the core of it is for me.
Absolutely. It's not about the quantity, it's about the quality. And I think we hear that on everything now. It's no longer about the quantity, it's absolutely about the quality
Yeah.
of the intent.
Yes.
Richard, you are a gem, and I look forward to staying connected
Yeah.
with you and learning from you. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us today on the Back to Business podcast. Be sure to visit calpeteclub.com, CALPETECLUB.com, to find out more about upcoming events, networking opportunities, and membership. If you are not already a valued member at the CPC, where we are proudly connecting and supporting Calgary's business leaders.